Hey guys, Tom Sheppard here at the Elite FTS compound. Today we're just going to go through some common mistakes that we see with the Romanian deadlift. We've got Naomi Sheppard here, all-time world record holder, demonstrating for us. What we're going to go through first with the Romanian deadlift is actually the difference between a Romanian deadlift and a stiff leg deadlift, because quite often they get mixed up, and they are two very separate exercises which are done differently for different reasons. Okay, so first we're going to have Naomi demonstrate a stiff leg deadlift. Okay. So what we're going to see here is the knees are purposely locked back, and then when she hip hinges, because the knees are locked back and she doesn't have any forward femur angle, then it is actually impossible to keep the bar against the leg. So we should see the knees stay locked back at all times, and there should be a constant gap between the bar and her upper leg. And Naomi's got some pretty big quads, so it's a bit closer than it will be for most people, but you get the point. Now, the reason this is different to a Romanian is because by locking the knees back, what we do is we disadvantage the glutes to put more weight through the hamstring. So this is a more hamstring dominant hip hinge than a Romanian deadlift is. By bending through the knee, what we do is actually relax the hamstring a little bit by stretching it less. So because the hamstring is stretched less, more of the load then goes onto the glute. So that's how this is going to look by comparison. So now, Naomi's going to stand at the top for her deadlift again, but the difference is now she's going to have a very slight knee bend. And now this knee joint is going to stay still as the hips hinge back. Like that. And because now the knee is slightly forward, what we can do here compared to a stiff leg deadlift is keep the bar right against the legs at all times. So which one you need to do is going to be dependent on what you're trying to target more. Yes, they're both a hip hinge that we want to do to strengthen the posterior chain, but if you need to target the hamstrings more, then you're better off doing a stiff leg deadlift. If you want to target the glutes more, then you're better off doing a Romanian. But people tend to get them mixed up or even think they're the same thing when they're not. So if we go on to the common faults with the Romanian deadlift, now that we know what it is, we're going to go first with using the knee joint too much. So when we're doing a Romanian deadlift, the whole goal is to load the posterior chain. But a common fault that we see, especially in people who are very quad dominant and like to favor their quads, is actually when they get towards the bottom of the movement, we're going to see the knees move forward, and which is going to load the quads and help them with that reversal at the bottom of the movement, as opposed to making it purely posterior chain in that lengthened position. So what that's going to look like here is she's going to have a very slight knee bend, but as she hinges back now, we're going to see the knees travel forward as she gets into that bottom range of motion. And what this is subconsciously, she's trying to take the load off the posterior chain, especially in the lengthened position where it's weaker, and bring her quads into it, which are a strong point for her. Okay? So if you have someone who's doing this, what you need to do is to cue them to keep their knees completely still in space. And if you want to, you can even put like your hand in front of their knee and just not allow their knee to move forward as they go through the range of motion. Now, sometimes people will be doing that as well, because they're trying to get too much range of motion out of it. Remember, the Romanian deadlift is a pure hip hinge. As soon as your hips can't go any further back, you're done. You don't need to go any further than that. Okay? If you end up bending through the knee and stopping just off the floor, then you're doing a floating deadlift, which is a completely different exercise altogether. So on that note, the second most common fault that we'll see then is people trying to get too much range of motion. The hips will go all the way back, and what we'll see instead is as soon as these hips can't go further back, we start getting lumbar flexion instead. So the hips go back, and then we extend through here, because that's the only way that we can get the bar lower to the ground without bending through the knee, okay? But what you need to look for is, if you can just stand at the top for me, what you need to cue for here is, as soon as these hips can't get any further back in horizontal space, you're done. Now that's going to be different for every person based on their structure, and it's also going to be different based on their mobility as well. If they can't get at least below the knee, or about an inch below the knee, then they probably got hamstring tightness issue that you need to be working on there. But they should still be staying in the range of motion where the hip is doing all the work, and we're not getting that lumbar extension. So again, just show us again, I'm sorry, the difference between that. So let's do a good one. So we're going to go back just as far as the hips can. There. Now it's still loaded, and now we push up. Okay? As opposed to going as far as the hips can and then rounding to get the bar lower, okay? Beautiful, thank you. So those are the most common faults you see with the Romanian deadlift. Either A, you don't know the difference between a Romanian and stiff leg deadlift and why you should be doing either one. B, using the quads and the knee joint if you're quad dominant and trying to take the load off the posterior chain. And C, trying to force a range of motion that isn't actually there. I hope you guys find that helpful. See you next time.